Morning, welcome to Ronny's Corner. As promised, today we're going to talk about why women volunteer more than men. Today I want to talk about this paper published in the American Economic Review, a paper by a few co-authors called Gender Differences in Accepting and Receiving Requests for Tasks with Low Probability. So in this paper, they try to see what makes people volunteer, how different people volunteer. What they do is the following experiment. They put people in the lab, they give them 2 minutes to make a decision whether to invest or not. If you invest, you get a payoff of 1.25. If nobody invests, we all get a payoff of $1. But if somebody invested and you didn't invest, you get $2. So kind of like in the Kitty Genovese game, this is a situation, strategic situations where everybody wants somebody to invest, but nobody wants to be that person. In particular, in this paper, they're interested in gender differences when playing this game. So what happens? You put a bunch of people in a lab. Let's say you put a mixed group in, and you see, who invests, who doesn't invest. So let's see what the results are. So in this graph, you see the difference between male and female. On the y-axis, this is the probability that people invest in the experiment, and this is the rounds that they play. And what you see is that no matter how many rounds you play, there's a big difference between women's propensity to volunteer versus men's propensity to volunteer. So this raises the question, what is it about women that they volunteer more? And, in many, maybe if this was a sociologist or a social psychologist running the experiment, basically the experiment would end here, and then we would think about a theory, what makes women more prone to volunteering than others. Kind of like in the Kitty Genovese case, we saw that some people interpreted that incident, that criminal incident, as something that is related to maybe different morals that people in Queens have versus other people. So is it true that women actually like to volunteer more than men for some reason? But this paper didn't just stop there. It took another step. And the question it asked is, suppose now we look at the same gender group. So we take a group of women and we take groups of men, and we do the same experiment and see what happens there. Are we going to see the same kind of gender differences when we do these two experiments? What the results look like for same-sex groups. So you can see the blue line is the male propensity to invest. You see that males are now investing much more. And the other line is the women's propensity to invest, and you see that women are investing in a lower probability than they did before. And you see that there are actually no difference between men and women in terms of their propensity to invest or to volunteer. So what's going on here? So let's think about what's going on here by thinking about what are the equilibria in this game. So this is a game at 2x2, but it's going to be kind of very similar like we did like you saw in the sets, when we have more people. So this game looks like this. You can invest, you cannot invest, and these are the payoffs. And we know that there's two pure strategy equilibria. And in these equilibria, somebody invests and everybody else doesn't. And the idea behind this equilibrium is that everybody expects this one person to invest, and therefore nobody invests because they know that that one person would do that. And what about that person? Well, it's all on his or her shoulders because everybody expects them to invest. So in the two pure strategy equilibria, we have the group somebody always investing. There's also a mixed strategy equilibrium, and as we saw in the Kitty Genovese case, when you have a mixed strategy equilibrium, everybody behaves in the same way in terms of the probability that they invest or volunteer. And the result of this equilibrium is that actually with some probability, and sometimes this probability is pretty large, nobody will invest. Going back to our general results here, how can we interpret why women tend to invest more in mixed groups, and they tend to actually show no difference to men when you have same-sex groups? So one way to think about that is that we're basically playing different equilibria. And for some reason, when we have mixed groups, it's kind of a culture focal point that women are the one that volunteer. Given that everybody expects women to volunteer, they actually do with a higher probability than men, and men, they can relax because they know that some women would actually volunteer. But once you put women into the same group, there's no focal point anymore, and then their propensity to volunteer is actually the same as men. So the cool thing about this experiment is that actually we get to see that there's no difference between women and men in terms of volunteering. It's just kind of an equilibrium phenomenon. And for some reason, our culture is such that we expect women to volunteer more.